I guess our first official non-makeover related webinar for the year in the RRP trainers group. This is called How to Train When You Can't Ride. And a friend of mine helpfully pointed out that it sounded like I was making a statement that nobody is capable of riding, which is not what I meant. So that is not why this is called How to Train When You Can't Ride. I am the last person who should be advising anybody on whether or not they can ride. This webinar is titled this way for other people like me and Dr. Reed, who can't really do a lot of riding in the winter months and might be feeling really left out and left behind. So welcome to How to Train When You Can't Ride. I'm going to introduce my co-panelist, Dr. Shannon Reed, who's a board certified large animal vet, and an associate professor of equine surgery in the Ohio State University's Department of Veterinary Clinical Sciences in Columbus. And in 2019, she also became the RRP's volunteer consulting veterinarian, and she helped us develop and implement the arrival exam. In her large amounts of spare time, she trains and competes in eventing with her 2018 makeover graduate, Jake's Mineshaft, who finished 7th in dressage. And she also competed at the 2017 makeover with Nate's Mineshaft, which is why I have dubbed her the mother of Mineshafts. And a fun fact, if you look at the Blood Horse's horse profile for Nate's Mineshaft, you will discover that not only there's plenty of photos of him winning graded stakes, but there's also a great photo of Shannon and Nate trotting across the head of the lake at the makeover. So I thought that was really cool when I ran him through Google earlier.
Yes, always fun to Google things.
And all right, so Dr. Reed, how is your winter going with your horse life?
Well, not, I would like to say smashingly, but not true. It's a stagger start. I purposely gave my horse off from November and December, thinking I would kind of start easing into doing some things in January. And the weather in Ohio has definitely not been cooperating with that. And I was trying to fill in with doing some haul-ins over to other arenas, which works out okay, except for if you're a professional trying to get home from work and things like that. So I would say I'm in the stagger start of actual riding, which doesn't mean I'm not doing things, but definitely I am nowhere near what people in the lower half of the United States are doing right now, for sure. I'm watching a lot of my friends on Facebook at Ocala and Aiken, and so I'd say I'm a little bit spiteful, a little bit jealous. That's how my winter of riding is going.
That's good. That's a good, healthy way to fuel your winter.
How's yours going?
Pretty much about the same. So this year I actually intentionally gave horses January and February off, which I don't normally do. I try very hard to at least hop on a horse and ride it out to look at cows and ride back. And that's usually about a 20-minute walk, and probably this time of year, especially, like anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes of that is hand walking to get around really icy spots. So when I was looking back at that, I was like, what is even the point? Like, I spend more time putting tack on than I actually spend in the saddle. So this year I had the genius, or so I thought, idea of I'm just going to give these horses 2 months completely off and focus on groundwork and all the other stuff that I wish I could tackle, when I'm trying to ride every day in the summertime and thinking, oh, I should have worked on that in the winter. So for a while that was going pretty well. We were getting out and hiking a lot. We were doing some lunging and some ground driving, and I could get up to the neighbor's outdoor arena, which is really nice because I keep my horses on the family beef cattle operation, and there is zero actual designated riding space anywhere. And then the past month, February has just been brutal with weather. So everything has been surrounded by ice. So we've been working on less exciting things in the barn. So I went on my 3rd ride of the year today.
I think you're right. I think I forget every year that February is the worst of the winter months, and I start to get ramped up because I see the other eventers going down south and things like that. But I think next year I'm going to shift my off time to probably January, February.
Yeah. And it's exactly every year. I'm like, I need to put something in my Facebook memories because that's how I look back every year to be like, what was I doing? Nothing. Every February, I'm like, I do nothing. I don't know why I try. So, and that went all the way back to the year I was preparing for the makeover. I didn't get much done in February then either. So I would imagine that there are other trainers in a similar boat that maybe only have an outdoor ring or maybe don't have a ring at all. So that is why we are here tonight, is to help inspire and also to commiserate. If anyone is feeling sad and just wants to vent in the comments section, feel free to do that too. So I always open this with a look. One of the reasons that everybody feels the pressure this time of year is because we've set up this timeline, right, for training. Like by October, I need to have my horse ready to go. And ready to go is a little bit of like a moving goal, you know, depending on what you want to get done with your makeover horse. For no horse entered in the makeover is the makeover the end game. Like this is just part of their training journey. I know it's something that probably everyone is maybe a little tired of hearing by this point too, because you know, it's one of two mantras we repeat all the time. One of those is stay in your lane, and the other is the makeover is not the end goal. But you know, if it's a bucket list show for you and you're working really hard for it, like, you know, maybe it is the big goal of the year and you want to work for it. So by this time of year, you're thinking like, oh my gosh, there's only a few months left and we're not going to get anything done because I can't ride yet. But in reality, you know, just think of if you start now, you have what, six months, 7 months to go. So what would you be accomplishing with a horse in 6 or 7 months if you don't have the makeover? Like if you're just training a green horse on your own, you know, you just set the same 6 or 7 month goal that you would have normally without the makeover. How far along would your horse be if you were only in training for 3 months? You know, you can slide that timeline back and sort of build in reverse where you want to be. And, you know, you might get to October and into that like final decision making time and just discover that your horse truly isn't ready, and that's totally okay. There's a couple ways that horses might not be ready. One of those is that the horse is not mentally ready for the big environment of the makeover, or your horse might not be trained or broke enough to perform the test that he's being asked. And then of course with the arrival exam, your horse just may not be physically ready to be at the makeover either. So, you know, the reality is that not every horse will make it to the makeover, but of course, you know, you can do everything in your power to make sure that he's ready to go. If you are thinking right now, you're like, oh my gosh, my horse is footsore, he's too thin, he's rehabbing an injury, he's not broke, I haven't sat on him yet. If you have access to the magazine, which if you have a joint or a digital subscription, you can hop on right now and take a look at past magazine issues. The winter, I happen to have this sitting right here, the winter 2020 issue, of course, is the last time that we had makeover winners to interview. Read through those because I think like 8 out of 10 didn't really start seriously training until April. This time of year, Cowboy Swagger had just raced like 30 days prior and then went and won the whole thing. So if you're not training heavily yet, like there is time. It doesn't feel like there is, but there is time.
Yeah, I think this time of year, my horse that I took to in 2018, who did both dressage, like you mentioned, and competitive trail, got top 10 in there, was having his second sinus surgery just now. So we weren't even thinking about riding. I was just thinking about, can I touch his head again at this time of the year?
Oh dear. I forgot you had like a real rehab.
Yeah, we did that. So you get to bring the perspective of I have no arena, and I get to bring the perspective of I am a veterinarian with horses, so they're always doing something to themselves that keeps me from being able to ride. And I don't have an indoor arena, so I like to balance us out here.
So Shannon's going to go over some of the reasons that you might not be able to ride your horse right now. We mostly just touched on those, but I'll let you tackle that list.
Sure. Yeah, and I think one thing I'll do is I'll circle back a little bit because you had mentioned the arrival exam, and you had also said that there might be reasons why you don't come to the makeover, and that be because your horse might not be fit enough. And I would like to bring up now, we're going to talk about this later in the year on another webinar, is that there is no such thing as transporting, even if it is a long distance, and losing an entire body condition score. So what's going to happen is you are going to get your horse in the best place possible. And if your horse is a borderline, like 4, like they're barely making the body condition of score, that's the horse that maybe will have trouble traveling, but they aren't solidly really in a body condition score of 4. So I just want to mention that with the arrival exam will not take people out when they get there because something changed from when they left to when they got there. It will change because someone didn't really think about, is it the best time for my horse to travel right now, given the condition that they're in? So just kind of put that in the back of your mind. It's not intended to make a panic attack, but it is intended to push you to decide, is my horse really fit to travel and do well that way? So some of the reasons that we know that you might not be able to ride, separate from what we've talked about with arena work and things like that, is you may have a horse that's on strict stall rest for injuries. Like they're not supposed to be leaving their stall for much of anything. So that's kind of the extreme on that one side. And then we have horses that might be allowed to walk. They are rehabbing and they are in the walking phase of things. So you might not be thinking you can ride with that as well. And then we have obviously people without arenas or safe areas to ride in poor weather or the dark. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, we're gonna, for those of us in the US, we're gonna leave daylight savings time. Some of us, that might help us out a bit. And then there's also horses whose behavior keeps them from being ridden safely. And that's a real thing for some of us when we start off and we're transitioning these horses. So we have the physical and the physical of the horse, the physical of your environment and your situation, and then the emotional. And honestly, there's the emotion of the horse and the person. If you are retraining thoroughbreds and they're relatively sensitive and we are stressed because of work, pandemic, and all of those things, we might not be emotionally ready to bring along a new horse under saddle right now. So I added that one in this year, is it might be that the horse is not the only one that's not ready to commit to the goal right there. And so I think that this is a part to sort of introduce what are some of the things that we can do in those situations. And I'm going to bring it from the perspective of the veterinarian. When I sit down to write a discharge for my patients, if something comes in and it has a suspensory ligament strain, I give the owner a basic rehabilitation program that says you're going to be on stall rest for this period of time. You're going to do hand walking. And I have added now sometimes under tack for walking, but not a lot of veterinarians even think about that. They're giving you a protocol of what they want your horse to do as far as exercise. So I type that all out and I give that to my client as guidelines. All right. So what I'm hoping that you'll do as a veterinarian on the call is that you may read those guidelines and say, okay, well, what about if my horse is on stall rest? What does my veterinarian think of me spending time practicing tying in the stall or moving over or doing a little bit of lateral work in the stall? Or I'm supposed to be hand walking my horse. What does my veterinarian think about me actually doing that walk outside down the driveway? If I'm allowed to hand walk, what do they think about me doing some trailer loading? So don't take the discharge that you get from the veterinarian and take it as the only things that are listed on there are the things you can do. Also, don't get on to, I don't want to pick on OTTB Connect, but we will for now, and say, my horse is rehabbing, what can I do? You could ask, maybe look for ideas, but always circle back to the veterinarian and say, I think I'm going to do this. So the point is, as a veterinarian, you only have so much time to write a rehabilitation plan. You have plenty of leeway to call or text or whatever communication method you use with your vet and say, hey, we're hand walking right now. What do you think about me using ground poles? What do you think about me doing that under saddle? And so that's the thing I want to introduce, is that initial rehab plan from your veterinarian is what they were able to put on paper in that period of time. Ask them questions and let them decide, and realize that every single suspensory injury is going to be different based on the ultrasound and things like that. So you can't ask, I can't call up Kristen and say, hey, how did you rehab Jobber's abscessed foot? Because she doesn't have my radiographs and things like that. So we want to circle back to the veterinarian, but just realize that the rehab that you got was a guideline to start, and there may be a lot of wiggle room for learning within that rehab that you'll have. So that's just something to kind of think about. And then the other thing is that don't allow rehab time to be wasted time. There are so many things you can teach your horse, and I think we're going to go over a little bit of them more as we go, that they just don't have to sit in the stall. They can be mentally engaged in things and learning. So that rehab time, and I tell this to every single one of my clients now, is you actually should come out of 6 months of rehab with a better horse than you went into it with, because you can work on a whole lot of things that have nothing to do with under saddle, where we all start to put ourselves under pressure. So that's sort of my spiel to start off with the reasons that you can't ride. And I'll hand it back to Kristen here, and we'll talk a little bit more about the kind of categories of training.
Yeah, I will just touch base on some comments from the Facebook page. Kate says, it has rained forever, Virginia. My girl has bruised soles from thin feet being so wet. No riding here. That's not a question. I just wanted to acknowledge that, Kate, I'm very sorry for you. That sucks. And Celia asks, as far as the vet check, why is there not a jog? There were a couple questionable horses in the past. So the TLDR answer to that is that the point of the arrival exam is to make sure that horses can comfortably and safely be at the horse park, period. So for one thing, jogging like 500 to 600 horses when they get there is just a monumental task. The walk exam ensures that they can move around the horse park comfortably and safely. And then beyond that, then the judges in each discipline have the call to pull horses who appear unsound at the trot for the task they're being asked to do. So I'll let you expand on that if you want, Dr. Reed, but otherwise we can.
Yeah, I'd just a little bit, only because two expansions to that. This year we have added jogs for those that are going into the finale. So there will be a formal jog for horses, the final competition that we've added this year. So that means since we're 2020 and 2021, basically 100 horses will be jogged and checked, and we'll use that as a time frame to see how can we do this. The other thing is when you get there, the arrival exam, you're going to have a lot more information on this. It's not just walking on any old surface down the grass. You're going to have an experienced veterinarian watching the horse walk on a firm surface. And I could bet dollars to donuts that I can see most horses that are going to show up lame enough in the show ring at a walk on a firm surface during turns. So just like Kristen said, we don't want the chaos of jogging 600 thoroughbreds day 1 and 2, but we can actually see a lot the way we have it set up for the arrival exam. So that's something. And for our bruised sole things, I'm sure someone's going to jump on this. I own every boot known to man, and I have loved the Scoot boots. If you're enjoying a horse with bruised soles, just look into a little bit the Scoot boots, because they make a big difference for rehabbing these thoroughbreds that need to get through the winter. So throw that out there. But you're right, we're not jogging horses per se in the entire group. We can still see a whole lot on the walking on the firm surface, and this year the finalists are going to jog.
Right. And we will have a very in-depth webinar later in the season about the arrival exam. So don't get too bogged down on the arrival exam now, but just make sure, that your horse is being prepared well and nice and fat and fit and sound. So it's all you need to worry about from the perspective of March right now. So what I've done is I've just jotted down what I call just 4 different categories of training. This is not anything scientific. You can find, I'm sure, all sorts of trainers much more experienced than I all over the internet making their own categories of training. But for the sake of thinking about things you want your thoroughbred to learn at this stage of the year, 4 different categories. The first is physical conditioning and the reshaping of muscles and muscle memory for life as a riding horse, right? Because the way we want our thoroughbreds to go as sport or recreational mounts is going to be very different from the way that they're going, when they're breezing on the racetrack or racing. A second category would be specific skills for your desired discipline. So that would be, what's going to make it a good dressage horse? What's going to make it a good show hunter? What skills does he need as a ranch horse? So those are going to be your discipline-specific skills. Generally, we probably all want them physically conditioned and going the same way, but there's a lot of skills they're going to need to learn for their respective test at the makeover, but then, life as a riding horse. Third category is general life skills as a show horse or a recreational mount. So that would be things like being tied to the trailer, standing around at horse shows, being polite in the warm-up, standing around for hours and hours while you wait for your class to come up. And then a fourth category is just general life skills as a horse in a private barn. So horses on the track, they're coming from a pretty regimented life. They have a regular schedule. They're exercised every single day. They're fed at the exact same time. They get the same groom, the same grooming, the same stall mucking. Everything is very much the same. And sometimes that transition from that kind of a lifestyle to a private barn, especially if it's like a small barn in your backyard, that can be a big hurdle for those horses. So there's a lot of different ways that you can be structuring your winter training to tackle all 4 of those categories without necessarily actually getting on and riding a lot. I think that's the thing that we all think about the most with the makeover is it starts December 1st and you got to ride, but there's a lot more transition happening for these horses in this first year than just how to ride around at the horse park well. So consider those categories as you think about different things you can do with your horses, especially if you are stall bound or ground bound right now. So now we're just going to get into the fun part, which is just some of the cool stuff that, some of the stuff that we like to do with our horses in the winter when we can't ride. Originally, I bought a trailer last year and I was thinking like, this winter, I know I'll haul to an indoor like at least once a week and it'll be great. And then I realized like, no, I need to park the trailer at home and the horses are on the farm 20 minutes away. And then we have to snow blow the driveway by hand. And then the snow plow, of course, puts a giant berm of snow across the end of the driveway. And then I realized like there was no physical way I was getting the trailer out once it started snowing. Because we're up in the snow belt in New York and we just get dumped on like all the time. So I haven't actually put a horse on the trailer since October or November. And then I realized that even if I was able to get my trailer out, that if I can't really ride at home, I didn't think it was very fair to my horse to put him on a trailer and ride him hard one day a week. So that's why I ended up just coming up with all of this fun stuff to do at home to try to keep him mentally engaged, as well as somewhat conditioned, and then tackling all of last year's trouble areas that I really wished I had worked on the previous winter. So Shannon, I'll let you kick off our list.
Sure. So we did some ideas and brainstorming, and I think before, if anybody were thinking about poo-pooing these ideas, I will say from universally following along, being a competitor and watching the trainers page, when people get to the makeover to that huge environment, the thing they're the most surprised about is the fact that the horses have trouble just dealing with getting there. It's not how well trained they were in jumping and dressage. It's the slight come apart they had with all the new horses there and things like that. So these are all building block tools that when you get there are going to make the difference between maybe a good experience and eventually the horse calming down a lot faster than the other horse, more so than how many 2-6 jumps you jumped before you got there. So these are the building blocks that when you get there, you're going to be pretty glad that you had in place. So one thing I had a huge amount of time with Q before I could ride him, because his skull was open for a long period of time, I know, it was gross. We did a huge amount of just walking, and it was hand walking down my dirt roads, but I didn't just walk down the dirt roads casually, although that is a great way to get you and your horse fit. And I know if anybody listens to a lot of things with different trainers, just you can't underestimate the power of a brisk walk to get condition and fitness going. But the other thing is, if you can safely walk in your neighborhood on dirt roads and things like that, you can investigate ditches, you can investigate mailboxes, you can investigate driveways, you can investigate random cardboard boxes, you can ask your horse to hold still while someone walks by. I taught most of my lateral work from the ground, walking down the ditch, down the dirt road. So it's not just that you're going to condition your horse walking, you're going to ask them to do tasks, you're going to ask them to stop, you're going to ask them to turn on the forehand. So I would walk with a rope halter and a dressage whip, not because I needed to move my horse quickly with the dressage whip, but I needed to ask him to move over. So we're talking about literally, if you have a plowed road and it's not a high traffic area, obviously, to just get out there and do hand walking with the idea of changing your pace, changing your gait, asking for lateral work, asking for turning on the forehand, all of those things as well. That can be done on pastures or all-weather trails as well, not just on the dirt road. But a good vigorous hand walking for 30 minutes is going to build a whole lot of fitness safely. And the more you can investigate things and honestly reward curiosity in your horse, because there's no pressure here. If you get to an arena and you try and show and you can't get to the corner because there's a shadow there, we don't all react by saying, well, I think I'll take a deep breath and let my horse figure out what's going on here. We think, I'm not going to be able to finish this class. So when you're walking down the dirt road and your horse is having an issue with the mailbox, you get some cookies out of your pocket for yourself, forget about the horse, you snack on them and you let them figure out what's going on with the driveway and the dirt and the mailbox. So using that period of time walking down the road to allow them to use their curiosity to investigate things takes a huge way to go. So I'm a big fan of using my hand walking to build tools for the time under saddle.
Yep. And if you're like me and you have a small herd of horses that all lives out together and they get extremely bonded very obnoxiously, hand walking, I find, is a little bit of a safer way to start in the spring, getting them away from each other for a little bit longer periods of time. So I just start close to the farm and then gradually expand my orbit with a hand walk. When I was younger and braver, I might have just gotten on and dealt with it. But now I'm like, I'm too old for that. So I hand walk until we're confident together. And he trusts me rather than trusting the safety of his herd back at the farm if he were to just peace out. So that's another way for anybody with a graduate that is dealing with issues. That's another way I like to use hand walking as well. We're on a paved road where people go very fast. So lucky you that you get a nice dirt road where people hopefully don't go quite as fast. But we have gotten very accustomed to talking to all the joggers that go by because they're always just like, hey, nice horse.
It sounds silly, but a 50-yard driveway is a lot of room to do lateral work.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we are blessed with a big farm driveway. So
yeah.
we are constantly side passing and leg yielding, hand yielding, however you want to do that in hand, all up and down. So, oh, hey, I transitioned to my next point without even meaning to. So exploring new things together builds confidence with your horse. It builds your horse's confidence in you to trust you a little better as a handler and then eventually as a rider as well. So exploring whatever new stuff you can find. So like Shannon said, go down and play with the neighbor's garbage and, get him used to plastic bags and cardboard boxes and things that blow around. And then I'll also add in some other actual obstacle work, which work well to strengthen the horse and then also just teach him to be aware of where his feet are going. So raised cavaletti or poles. This year, instead of trying to figure out some sort of pole riser, I just built them out of snow and then, put a little divot in top and set the pole on that. So then if he knocked it down, it wasn't a big deal. I just sculpted up again and set my pole back on. So that works pretty well. And of course, then with the more snow we got, the higher I could set my raised cavaletti. So that was really nice. If you have access to hills, this is a really good way, hike some hills. You will get tired as well, especially if you have a lot of deep snow. So I was out schlepping around in the snow quite a bit. Unfortunately, I think I've lost whatever fitness I may have gained in early February with the ice that we got in late February, but we were doing probably like a good 2-mile hike up and down in the snow. At one point I had my horses pretty well broke on the lunge line that I could lunge them up and down the hill and save myself some of the slogging up and down. So if you combine the lunging on the hill, up and down and along the hill is good for balance as well. That's good for strengthening top lines and changing muscle shapes in your horse. If you have snow, use it if you can safely. If you know that there's not ice under the snow or other like farm implements that you don't know where they are. Horses that are stepping high in snow are really working stifles and backs. So that's an area of weakness in my own horse. So I'm like very in tune to ways to strengthen stifles. And then if you're not super confident in your horse's ability to stay with you while you're leading him, but you have an experienced older horse around, you can also pony. I don't have a good combination of horses to do that with right now, but the year that I had Jobber for the makeover, I had a great old ranch horse that I could pony Jobber all over the place off of the old horse. So we did fields, hills, roads. We did some ditches and creeks. We went through the cattle herd. This was also really good in the days before December 1st when I was out of rides. Good for conditioning and fitness, but it's also really good for introducing some of that discipline specific stuff, especially if you're working in a discipline like trail or ranch that has a lot of natural based obstacles.
Perfect. And like, while we're at it, I think, certainly there are some, you can ride at a walk a lot, but some unmounted skills that I thought were really helpful. One, for life, and two, for going to the makeover. We're working on things like ground tying. And I had this sort of running joke when I was rehabbing Q. I took pictures of him standing everywhere. Like randomly we would go and he would stand somewhere for 5 minutes and I would get a good picture of him. And I thought that at the very least I was going to go to the makeover and stand at every single part of the Kentucky Horse Park with my horse still. But it's a huge skill because you might be waiting for your class. There's a lot of chaos going on there. So learning to ground tie and or just stand still comfortably is a huge skill that will make you come far ahead in life and on the makeover. So working on ground tying, introducing things like dragging an object, having a tarp around. This is a great time of year to work through puddles. Like put on your muck boots and walk your horse through puddles just to get them used to water and things like that. And some of you might be saying, well, I'm going to enter dressage. I have no need for my horse to learn how to drag an object. And that's probably very true. But when you get to the makeover, it's going to be like show like no other, where there are going to be 10 disciplines that are warming up in common areas. And everybody does a pretty good job of having the hunters in one place. But if you were to make it to the finale, you got to be able to be in that big arena around things that are going on. So exposing them to as many things that are going to go on with the other disciplines. If you can get a barrel and walk your dressage horse around a barrel, they're not going to be as spooked by the fact that there's going to be barrel racers and things out there. So thinking about everything that's going to go on there, a huge thing is standing at the mounting block. So I don't know how happy I am now that any arena I go to, that I have taught my horse to come to me at the mounting block and stand still. You could spend 3 weeks working on that, and it sounds like a small thing, but then when you start going to shows, you have to be able to get on your horse, and they're going to fall back on whatever skill they know best. So the mounting block is a huge thing. The other thing I've had friends do, and I think this is amazing, is you can go to Tractor Supply or other feed stores, and they will give you their leftover banners from sales, and you can hang those on the wall of your barn or anything like that and get them used to things hanging off the wall, because there are going to be promotion sponsor banners and things like that at the RRP. So just go to Tractor Supply or a feed store or anything like that and ask them for their old banners, and you can hang them up around your barn and work through them, because those are going to be there as well. So just some thoughts of start getting them used to objects from the ground and to doing skills from the ground that you're going to need, such as ground tying, holding still, and getting on the mounting block.
Yeah, so like a lot of the stuff we keep bringing up, like, is very relevant to the competitive trail and the ranch work people, but like this is all stuff that just makes for a good, well-rounded, well-broke horse. So one of the mantras I think I repeat at least once a year to everybody, you know, a lot of people, and this is something that even the competitive trail and the ranch people are guilty of doing, they want to know, like, well, what kind of obstacles are there? What is the trail pattern going to be like? And just don't teach to the test necessarily, just get a really nice, well-broke horse. So these are all the pieces that are just going to help make your, you know, eventer or show hunter or show jumper as well-rounded as, you know, the obstacle type horses that, you know, can walk through a million pool noodles without blinking. Like, you might not necessarily be riding through a car wash very often, but, you know, it's really nice to have a horse that's confident in new situations and with new sensations. So that's sort of what we're getting at here with all this other stuff to add to your horses. So one thing I've been working on a lot when I could get out of the barn was showmanship, which I did not fully appreciate as a 14-year-old 4-H student. But now that I'm like a grown adult, I understand like why we spent so much time on showmanship in 4-H. And I'm sad that teenage me didn't really appreciate how valuable of a skill that is. But having a horse that walks and stays right next to you automatically, or trot, you know, you jog and the horse just trots right off with you, that is super helpful for trotting for the vet or trotting for your finale exam when you make it to the finale this fall. A horse that readily backs right off your body language. You turn around and he just chugs backwards. A horse that can square his feet up. If you are preparing your horse for the marketplace and you want to get a horse set up well for photographs, teaching a horse to do that now will make your life much, much, much easier in July when your horse is nice and slick and fat and looks good for photographs. So you don't spend 50 minutes trying to place his feet just so. Teach them that now. Having a horse that pivots in each direction is very useful. Even having a horse that, you know, anybody who did do the 4-H showmanship thing, you remember the quartering system where you're like, okay, if the judge is in this quadrant, which side of the horse do I need to stand on? And at the time I was like, I don't get this, this is stupid. Now I understand, like, that's where you stand for the farrier, that's where you stand for the vet. And it's just useful to have a horse that knows to stand still while you're moving around it. That's really valuable. And a lot of this showmanship stuff, I did not anticipate that personally I was going to use this a lot outside of the show ring. But having a horse that knows if I stand and give him a cue that he needs to get quiet and square his feet up and stand with his head level and wait, that's really helped when I'm leading Jobber around the farm and he starts to get big, which is his big thing. When he's fresh, he just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually he blows up. So teaching him that aid to say, look, when I stand and I swear to you and I give you this aid, you're going to get it together and take a deep breath and relax. That's something I wish I had figured out 2 years ago when I was preparing for the makeover 3 years ago, because that would have come really in handy. So everybody dust out your 14-year-old showmanship book and get started, because that is one of the weirdest things I did not think I would use later in life, but has been very valuable to me.
Yes, I think while you're talking about showmanship, we talked about this a little bit, but there's a lot of stuff that can actually be done in the stall. Like, you may have a horse that's totally on strict stall rest, or your weather is such that you can't even leave it. So things that I have found that I can introduce in the stall is actually some lateral work. Like, I can introduce side passing from the ground in the stall. I can introduce a leg yield, a turn on the forehand and haunches from the ground, because that small space allows the horse to focus on me. So that kind of stuff can actually be done in the stall. And I think that things like carrot stretches or horse crunches, where carrot stretches are where we're taking a carrot, we're asking the horse to reach down between their legs and off to the side. And horse sit-ups are when we actually take our hand and we push pretty firmly from the sternum underneath the horse all the way back towards the sheath, if they have one, or a mammary gland if they're a female, so that they kind of round their back up, is something that really helps to start building that top line when they're in the stall and keep them from falling apart while they're on stall rest. So the other thing is you can teach them to soften to the bit. And I don't mean by tying them in a stall with a bit to their stirrup. That's a whole different thing. I mean, you in the stall with them and the bridle, asking them to give and move. So total stall rest is a place that you could introduce moving your feet, asking them to soften, or just asking them to stand quietly with a person around. Because that's actually something that's disconcerting to them, is that there's someone in their stall. This year, the veterinary exams may be done in the stalls. We're working on that. So it would be nice if you got your horse used to the idea of standing still in the stall with people around there. So that's just some short stuff that can be done actually in the stall as well.
And I think I remember you mentioned this in the trainer group, that you kind of went back to what the horse knew as a racehorse, because you only have 2 horses at home. So you take one out and then one is left at home alone. And you realize that racehorses are commonly single tied in the stall, for things like having their stall cleaned, if they're in the stall still in the morning, or, being tacked up, having their wraps put on, like whatever. And I remember that you were like, aha, if I tie my horse in the stall, he's happier with that, because that's what he knows and that's what he's comfortable with.
That's exactly it. When he starts having a little bit of come apart, so I put a bolt hole in the wall. It's relatively safe in a trailer tie, and I've made it just like at the track. They'll come through in the morning and they'll clip everybody to the wall. In some barns, not every single one. This is pretty common. You're walking through a barn and you're there at 5:30 in the morning. Most of the horses are clipped to the wall after they've had their breakfast for them to get wrapped and things like that. So they know, maybe they don't know how to cross tie, but they do know how to tie in their stall for the most part. So for him, it's like an instant, like I gave him something he already knew. He was having a panic attack and I said, remember when you used to tie the wall? And he went, okay, thanks. Like, so I would say that probably 95% of racehorses know how to tie to the wall and hang out in their stall. And that might be something that's helpful at the makeover too. You might not be able to you might need a safe space for your horse, and putting a zip tie on a bolt and letting them sit to the wall might just let them internalize what's going on with them. But absolutely, you're right. Absolutely. He ties in the stall and he goes, oh, okay. Now I know what I got going on here.
Right. Yeah, I thought of that when we were talking about things to do in the stall, not necessarily that everybody needs to go and, tie their horse to the wall for hours at a time. But if you are having issues at all with a horse on stall rest, like they should be accustomed to being tied to the wall, so you can safely, muck out or wrap or, examine wounds, poke at the legs, look at the tendons. So all horses, whether they're rehabbing an injury and they're stall bound or you just can't ride them right now, body work might be something that you look into. You can, of course, hire all sorts of professionals to do this. So we have, chiropractors, you have equine masseuses, you have all the various PEMF things. There's all sorts of, like other modalities that people can do. But if you just want to look into stuff that's going to improve your relationship with your horse yourself, I always recommend T-Touch fascia massage. It's pretty easy to learn out of a book. I was lucky enough to work with the developers of T-Touch at a ranch out west for many years. But that can be a really good way to relax a horse and help them enjoy their time with you. So that's just my personal plug for T-Touch. But there's a lot of other sort of massages and touches that you can learn yourself. So out of books or with resources on the internet, and they're not necessarily going to do any damage. So, like deep tissue massage is something that maybe you don't want to start sort of experimenting with yourself. But like, a light sort of skin massage, that's not something that's going to break your horse if you're learning yourself. Something else you might be able to work on if conditions are safe. So not for me right now, because most of my driveway is ice, and I also can't get my trailer out anyway, but working on trailer loading, working on tying to the trailer. A friend of mine is like, oh, I always tack my horse tied to the trailer. And I was like, oh my God, genius, because I bet that would help every time I take my horse trail riding. And he's dancing back and forth and I am chasing him back and forth with a heavy Western saddle trying to tack him up. If I spent more time actually tying my horse to my trailer in my farm driveway and tacking him there, he would be much better at a day show. So that's something I can put on my own homework list. Trailer loading in general, I did teach both of my horses to self-load, and I'm sure they'll have to be retaught this spring when we start going places again, but that's really convenient, and it's good for me when I'm loading horses by myself. And if your horse is getting good and accustomed to trailer loading, then you can start shipping out to other arenas, even if all you do when you get there is just hand walk around a new place and then load up and go home. So that's something that I think, Shannon, you're also pretty accustomed to doing.
Yes, this is actually one of my favorite things, and it has made my life really a lot simpler with my horses. So I think most veterinarians, if you ask them, unless you're dealing with a fracture or an arthroscopy or things like that, most of them would be okay with you randomly just trailering your horse as long as you're not getting there and doing a lot of activity. So people always laugh. I have a pretty large thoroughbred. He's 17 too, but I call him my purse horse. But his purse is actually the trailer, and he's not a Chihuahua, but I put him in the trailer and we go everywhere. And how I started is, if I had to go grocery shopping on a Saturday, I put the horse in the trailer and I literally took him to the grocery store because they have a big parking lot, and I left him out there for a little while. 10-15 minutes while I went and got something. And at first, maybe I left my husband out there to get a hear thing. So it was the horse and the husband. But the point of all that is I went to my haircuts with me. He'd go to work with me and I'd work up a colic and then I'd bring him inside and put him back. But he's so used to the trailer being his home away from home now that he can stand at a 3-day event in his trailer and eat his hay for hours, and he's quite happy there. When you get to larger shows, and if you have trailered over, if you ever tried to unload at the horse park, you're going to be in line. And the first thing that happens when you pull into the horse park is your horse doesn't like to stand still on a trailer and they start having a freak out, you're going to come to the makeover like this. Ah! Like that's the first unload. But if you take your horse to the grocery store, or you take your horse to go get gas, and they get on and they get off and they have snacks and it becomes routine to them, it makes your whole life a whole lot better. Then once I have my horse where they are comfortable just being in the trailer, I sign up to just haul in and not show at a whole bunch of schooling shows before I ever get on my horse and realize that I'm going to show. And here's the thing that I love and didn't even know this. So I mostly do eventing very poorly, but I try, and I do some dressage. But there are so many Western type fun shows around me. And I have realized that I don't really care if I'm wearing the wrong outfit. I will pay a haul-in fee and I will just go stand either with my horse in the corner on the ground or sitting on my horse in the corner of the warm-up pen at the closest Western schooling show. In my English saddle, I don't care. And I hang out there and people ask me what's going on. I tell them about my thoroughbred, and most of the show organizers are fine with that. So by the time and it cost me about $25 for a haul-in fee. At a schooling show. And the first time I plan to go to a jumping schooling show with a no horse, I don't sign up for any classes. I get there, I hand walk until they're calm, and some horses that's taken an hour and some horses that's taken 10 minutes. And then we go have snacks at the trailer, and then we go stand by the warm-up pen, and then we go home. So introducing this concept of trailering for no reason and going to shows to just experience the environment, you can do that while you're doing a lot of rehabs, as long as your veterinarian clears it. So you want to make it so boring that the horse is like sighing and being like, oh God, here we are again at a show. So find any sort of local show in your area. It doesn't even have to be in your discipline. See if they have a haul-in opportunity, haul there and just stand there and hang out. So that's something. And the other thing is, try to get through, there's a book out there called 101 ground exercises for horses. It's similar to the 101 jumping exercises, all of those, but there's 101 exercises in that book you can try and get through, and you can also try and get through them at the schooling shows. So since you introduced the topic of practicing getting on the trailer, I'm going to take it to the next level and make it your purse horse, that it goes everywhere with you. Just put him in the purse, give him a snack, and he hangs out there. And it first make sure it's safe and then kind of move on. I can tell you I can get my trailer in and out of a lot of hair salons and grocery store parking lots, and I can't get through a drive-through. But anyway, that's my pitch, is trailer when it doesn't matter. Go to shows and roar up when it doesn't matter. You're not emotionally involved, the horse isn't involved, until the point where you're so bored that you just wish you could jump something, and so does the horse.
And I think too, like maybe picking shows outside your discipline, that's a really good way to introduce maybe your thoroughbred to a crowd that does not necessarily know thoroughbreds. So hopefully your thoroughbred is on its best behavior when you do that. But like in my experience in having shown both English-based disciplines and Western-based disciplines is like the Western shows in particular are so random, but people are maybe a little more tolerant of like horse shenanigans. So if your horse is kind of like being a dink, like, nah, nobody seems to mind too much.
You also have to be tolerant of them there too. And you have to go there and just be like, well, whatever, I'm going to ignore that. But you're right. They excuse a lot of things from the giant monster dragon because they just are like, nah, whatever. It's that chicken or English pants again.
Right. Well, and like I'm now the person intentionally showing a tall, leggy animal at the Western stock show, and like the fact that I can lope in the cutting warm-up pen with everybody else and not take somebody out, I'm like, yay, not because Jobber was ever bad in the warm-up pen, but just because there's a lot of horses all loping like, I-95 traffic at top speed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But yeah, if you can make it there.
And the biggest thing that argues for going someplace that's not your discipline is suddenly you don't care. And when you don't care and your emotions come down, the horse doesn't, right? Like I could go to a show right now. And if I went to an event, I would start to panic that if something went wrong, my whole season was blown. We're not ready for this level. We're not doing things. And suddenly I'm a factor in the situation. But if I'm going to go to a local gymkhana and maybe I'll do banana bareback, maybe I won't, but I'm not all wound up. So I think that your point is now you're getting to those shows and you want to be good. You want to be loping the circles. If I went there, I'd be like, meh. Whatever.
There's cows everywhere. It's fine.
Cows. We can work a cow now. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, you just get them on that flag. You're gonna be good to go.
We're fine. Yeah, we're on the flag.
Good. You'll have by far the largest cutting horse anyone has ever seen. But that's wonderful. So, some other fun like ground stuff that I've tried this summer or this winter. Yeah, I'm so used to winter now, it's become summer. Maybe this isn't that 101 ground exercises for your horse, but just random stuff where you're like, never going to need this outside of school, but we're going to do it anyway. Straddling a pole the long way has been kind of fun. I know you've upped the challenge. You're doing it on horseback. I'm not there yet. And my pole is only a fence post, so it's like half as long. That's a good one. Backing through like figures, so like backing and turning and then backing and turning rather than just backing straight. That's a good one. Also probably like a proprioception kind of exercise. I do a lot of work like take one step over a pole, now take it back, now take two steps, now take one back, now take both back, now take one forward, now, and the horse is like, oh, whatever, but then eventually they actually learn how to go over a pole without tripping and falling, so that's a plus. Backing over poles, like there's a lot of stuff you can do if you only have one pole. We have a really good 5-minute clinic on the RRP Facebook page from Lauren Burke. She does 10 different exercises with a single ground pole.
It is good.
That's a really good one. So if you guys are bored at home and can only do stuff from the ground and have one pole, you can do a lot of stuff. So, and again, you don't even need a real pole. I'm using like a retired fence post that was in the corner and I stole it from the rest of the farm and drug it into a catch pen and I play with that there. So, so I've mentioned this a few times this evening. This is a really good time to tackle all of this stuff, especially if we have 2020 trainers who maybe got in a couple of horse shows last year or got in a lot of training. And now that maybe they're grounded, they're thinking of all the stuff they wish they had worked on. Now is a great time to tackle all of that stuff. So when you, this will free up all your time in the summer too, to actually like train and condition and do all the stuff that you want to be doing year round. But things like, does your horse stand nicely for the farrier? Like that might be a really basic thing. And everyone's like, yeah, sure he does. And then, the horse is backing rapidly away from the farrier with a shoe half on. Does he rush in and out of stall doors? Is he weird about like low doors and stuff over his head? Does he throw a fit when he's left in the barn alone? Mine does. We're working on it. Does he, is he like head shy in weird ways? Like all those little things that sort of add up over time that you're like, I wish I should, I should take a few minutes and tackle that. Like this is the time, tackle the stuff now. Maybe just write a list of like stuff that you remember that was weird and then chunk it down and figure out how you can fix that over the winter. This is like the prime time to do that. And if worst comes to worst and you are like, I don't know what to do, I can't get a horse out of the barn, everything is icy, he knows how to ground tie, I can do whatever with him. At worst, give your horse the winter off, let him gain some weight, let him settle into your farm routine, especially if you're a 2021 trainer who just got your horse. Like, at the absolute worst, like, you can use this time to let your horse be a horse too. You know, you don't have to be out there trying to do 400 different exercises with a ground pole tomorrow.
Yeah.
In a pinch, in a pinch, you know, letting your horse just have the winter off to decompress, eat a lot of hay, and get a nice chunky hay belly on him that you can work off in the spring is always an option. But hopefully we've given you guys enough, you know, general ideas and things to get started with, that this does certainly not have to be wasted time if you are like us with no arena at home and no good way to ride your horse right now. So
yeah. And I would even say so much, it's actually the opposite of wasted time, because 2 months spent on small skills accelerates you so much more than trying to fix it later at the last minute. Like, your horses are already athletes. They know how to be an athlete. They can learn to bend through the rib cage in their stall and then they move on. Like, you already own an athlete. You don't need to worry about teaching them to do some of the athletic things. You need to worry about giving them teach the skills that they don't have off the track. So rather than even just not just wasted time, this is amazingly valuable time to build those skills. And we sound like a broken record, but that's because we've seen it over and over and over again, that these small things make a huge difference.
yeah, and I can tell you that, like, in 2018, when I was preparing for the makeover, I think I probably just spent too much time, and I tried really, really hard to not drill things. You know, my goal was like, no, 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 it's just a stop on our journey. It's not the end goal. But, you know, by August, you get really competitive and you're like, I really want my horse to go and be good and make me proud and make myself proud and bring honor to my house and so on and so forth. You know, like, everybody, it happens to everybody. It's okay. You know, even the veterans who've been there for years and years. And it's really hard to fight that temptation to, like, just drill things. So I, like, basically untrained my horse and had to retrain him again. And if I had just, you know, taken my time and enjoyed my horse a little more, horses learn a lot faster than we give them credit for. And really, I mean, largely my journey was for me teaching myself to be a better rider and a trainer. And that was maybe not necessarily fair to put that on my green thoroughbred, but we got there and we had a great time, and you know, we're still here now. But yeah, I can tell you that I drilled too much, and I could have and should have spent a lot more time doing stuff like this, you know, the kind of stuff that would really set him up for success for the rest of his life, because now I'm sort of reaping what I sow now, and, you know, finding out like, oh, my horse doesn't do stall rest well. You know, I turned him out all the time and that was great, and put him on a really nice green pasture, and that's how he gained all his weight. But now he cannot be in a stall for more than 10 minutes. So I'm, you know, tackling all that stuff now that I should have tackled the first year. So if nothing else, let my journey be a lesson to you all.
Totally with it. Yeah. I love the whole, and I think looking back on it, where I had the most amount of fun, like, the makeover is awesome. Like, nothing can duplicate it, but it was that 6 to 7 months beforehand. I trail rode Nate. I took a graded stakes winner who was just castrated. He was a nasty horse for a little while. He was angry, and we rode like 500-600 miles all over the Midwest until he was like licking mules if he saw them at the corner. Like, he just became a different horse. So just when I think back on it, like the actual day we did competitive trail, I don't know, I was just proud of that horse for getting through it because of all the environment and things like that and where he'd been in his past. But if I look back at that 6 to 7 months where I learned a totally different discipline with him and rode all over the country, it was an amazing experience. So just don't lose this part of the makeover for that week, which is equally amazing.
Did you track your TIP hours for that?
They hadn't started yet. That
bummer.
Yeah, no, it was, I couldn't track it. I have so many pictures, and I found all these places that you could camp that I didn't even know existed, that had cabins and stalls, and they're all over the Midwest. And we meet a group of girlfriends that are all eventers, and we go, and our horses learn hills and getting over logs and things like that, but going and camping. Sometimes they don't fit that well in the stalls if they're giant. But gosh, like, I didn't know that there was so many places that hosted, like, they'll cook for you too. They have campfires and stalls and things like that. There's probably hundreds of them all over the country. That expanded my mind. So you can look for places that you can bring your horse, and they have cabins and you ride out from there, and they have trails. So yeah, we did all that. We didn't get our TIP miles, we should have, but it was an amazing experience.
We should start to make that like the secondary goal, to encourage people to not
Yeah,
spend
get
all their
them-
time training in the ring. Like also try to at least hit your 25-hour badge for
Yeah, I think all of us know that trail riding will bring horses so much farther. Then they have to learn to manage their own feet. They have to learn to manage their environment. You have to learn to let go, because if you try to ride your horse in a contact through a trail ride, you'll both be pretty exhausted by the end of it, right?
yeah, you will have a very stiff back.
So this is my last advocate as we close out this session, is just consider trail rides. Consider camping and trail riding with your dressage horse, with your hunter. I promise you, it'll make them better.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, speaking from someone who doesn't have a ring and just rides out in the cow pasture, like there were a few moments where I was like, oh, I wish I had an arena just to know how to, maybe put a pattern together in a ring with walls. But your horse goes straight and they go forward. So if you too are also working with no arena, you will actually be stronger for it, even if it doesn't feel that way in March, which it definitely doesn't.
You pick a tree and you head for it and you're straight. And I don't know about you, but when I actually get into an arena with dirt, I feel amazing. I'm like Superman.
I also feel very safe.
I trained on grass where I can barely turn a corner, and I'm like, was that C? I think that was C. We're gonna make a 20-meter circle. And then I get in an actual, like, forget about dirt. What's the CG footing? If you put Q and I on CG footing, we're practically Grand Prix.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Jobber loved the horse park. He was like,
all of our training in the pasture, we have our footing.
Yeah. So you guys on hashtag Team No Arena who might be struggling now when everything is either mud or ice, yes, you will be better for it in the end. I don't see any questions coming through. Hopefully, we don't usually get a lot of questions on this webinar. The whole point is that everybody is fired up and is going to go tackle 400 new groundwork exercises tomorrow and make the most of their winter training time. If you guys have questions after the fact, definitely shoot us an email at info@therrp.org, and we'll try to address it. I will do a quick commercial now. Oh, hang on. Question. Oh, thank you so much for doing this. You're welcome. Thank you for your question. Never mind, wasn't a question. We have next Tuesday, I'll be back again with our executive director, Jen Reutz, and we'll be covering marketing and funding your makeover journey. So if you are looking for tips and tricks for not only like sharing your journey with the general public and your own network, but also hopefully leveraging that to fundraise your way to Kentucky. Come back again next Tuesday at 7. And then the next 2 webinars that we are working on scheduling, we don't have firm dates for that yet, but we're looking at the end of March and into April. We will have our nutrition webinar that we do every year for sure. And this year we're taking a body conditioning score track with that. And we're gonna work with some nutritionists and vets who are gonna help you guys figure out exactly like where your horse falls on the Henneke scale, and then how to make some nutritional changes so that your horse is in good shape by the time he gets to Kentucky in October. And then we're also going to be doing I guess we're calling it OTTB 101, or how to discover your thoroughbred sorted past, but just ways to use all of the tools that the Jockey Club offers already to learn more about your thoroughbred, figure out his background, and how his performance on the track might translate to his performance as a sport horse. So that's going to be a fun one. That's a new one for us, but we're looking forward to it. So if you guys have any other webinar suggestions, definitely send us an email or drop a note in the trainers group, and we will see what we can do for you guys. But we love doing these. So thank you to everybody who hung out with us tonight. And if you're watching this on replay any other time, thanks for hanging out.
I love doing this one. Thank you. It re-energizes me every time.
I know. I feel very motivated again. Like, maybe tomorrow, maybe I will work on.
I don't know what else I'm going to teach them, but it's going to be something. I'm hauling them both out tomorrow.
Oh, you're going to take both of them out together?
But now I want to take my game up. I'm not.
Yeah, now I'm going to be out there tonight digging snowdrift out.
Okay, so here's my story. I ran home and I went to haul. I left work early to go haul out to an arena. And when I got there, I thought because the trainer was in Mississippi for a cutting that the arena would be quiet. And instead there was 47 children practicing ground, like poles, barrels, and roping.
Oh,
So the roping barrels was new. Q was like, okay, I thought I had figured everything out, and now they're roping the barrel I jump over. So we worked on that today.
yeah, I would love to read his autobiography of like
He's got a lot of
post racing life of like, and then.
But yeah, I'm reinvigorated. Thanks for doing this.
All right. Thanks a lot, folks. Have a lovely evening. Go forth and get training.
See you guys.